All right, welcome back, folks. January 6th, 4 years ago, you remember famously January 6th. We won't rehash the details of that day, but there was one very, I'll call him probably the most popular person of that day, Jake Chansley. He's the shaman. If you remember the Capitol building, the protest at the Capitol building, Jake is the man there. And you remember the headdress, and you remember the spear with the flag on it. You know, Jake, I want to take us, just refresh the folks' memory, and I really wanted you to tell us what was going on inside from your own words that day, January 6th, 4 years ago today.
Well, what happened inside is not what we were told, that's for sure, either on the internet or on the Mockingbird media. What happened inside is very much a stark contrast from what happened outside. There was violence and chaos outside the building, but as far as I can tell, that was provoked because there was tear gas, concussion grenades, and rubber bullets shot into a peaceful crowd. So from what I remember, it was after all of that all hell broke loose outside. But when it comes to what happened inside, it was peaceful for the most part. I mean, other than Ashley Babbitt being shot. But the thing is that the Mockingbirds and the media needed my image for their shock and awe campaign so that they could create the illusion that what happened outside the building also happened inside.
You know, Jake, this is very important here because Tucker Carlson, a friend of mine, we used to work with Tucker for a long time. Tucker was given some video that wasn't available to you at the beginning of when they arrested you and your defense was deciding whether to plead or not. This video wasn't available, and we're going to roll some of that video. That video shows, and as Tucker points out, and I think he's right, it looks like the Capitol Police, rather than fearing for their lives and being attacked and worrying about, you know, their family, they're almost acting as Tucker pointed, tour guides with you. Tell us the interaction with Capitol Police inside.
Well, I volunteered to help the police when I saw that there were people inside the Senate chamber. That's why I was being walked around the building, because we were looking for an entrance to the Senate. The police were overwhelmed, but I think that was by design. I think Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell wanted it that way. I think people like Yogananda Pittman wanted it that way because they wanted the shock and awe. They wanted the chaos. Either that or they are just so incompetent that they couldn't see this coming from a mile away. Either way, they should not be in their positions of power.
You know, there's a lot said. I think Trump has said he reached out to Pelosi in advance, and she denied him. She denied him. What do you know about that? Were there others than the Capitol? Here's what I'm getting at. We'll talk about what happened with the police presence, Capitol Police, and were there others that came along to help. But I want to know, Jake, in your words, there's some indication. In fact, Christopher Wray was kind of put on the stand and didn't really have a good answer, in my opinion. I think he lied on the stand, Christopher Wray, when asked, were there FBI assets in the crowd on January 6th? Do you know of anything like that?
What I know is that the events of January 6th have all of the hallmarks of regime change, and our government at this point is expert level at regime change. If you look at the events that took place before January 6th, whether it be with COVID or the riots that were all over the country, the BLM Antifa riots, and the standing down of law enforcement and mayors or governors all over the country, if you look at the Hunter Biden laptop suppression, you look at the mail-in ballots, you look at the 21 million extra votes that Biden just got out of nowhere campaigning from his basement, you look at the events of January 6th, it all is cumulative and culminative. And if you do your history homework, it seems to make sense that the government would try something like this so that they could do something like what was done in the Biden administration recently over the last 4 years.
So let me ask you another way. Did you see FBI? Did you see FBI? I think they call them human assets. I believe that's what Christopher Wray said. And when he was point blank asked on the stand after, you know, on the legally testifying under oath, he couldn't answer whether there were or how many. He said there. I'm not allowed to disclose that. We have pictures of people who looked like FBI agents. We've seen them in other places as well. Do you think there were FBI assets there? Do you know there were?
The way I look at it is, first of all, there were people with earpieces and face coverings and all sorts of stuff, even eyeglasses, you know, like sunglasses, hats, covering themselves entirely. And Trump supporters don't do that. So that was kind of weird. But the notion that federal agents were not in the crowd of over 1 million people that day is ludicrous. If the government didn't have government agents in that crowd, I'd be upset with them. You know what I'm saying?
So if there were, then, you know, if you'd known about that, maybe you could have used some of those people as, you know, evidence, you know, when you went to trial. So tell us, so
I didn't go to trial.
Well, okay, right, because you pled. Here's my point. You may have gone to trial had you had that evidence, I guess. Tell us in your words.
You
pled guilty.
About the evidence that was suppressed. So what happened is that the government made available 44,000 hours of footage on the internet. Okay, so they said that they provided that evidence that Tucker showed everybody to my attorney sometime in October, after I've already pled guilty. And that it was made available to my attorney. But no. What happened is that they gave him a link to 44,000 hours worth of footage. And they said, here, find your client. And they did the same thing with all of the other people that were January 6th defendants as well. Now, if you understand the way that like the Brady rule works, the government technically was abiding by the law by saying, oh, here's all the evidence that we have. But the idea of presenting only the evidence that is damning to the defense, right, and saying this is all we have, oh, and this here, but search through it, find your client. Do you realize the amount of time, money, resources that it's going to take to go through all that just to find one person? Do you see what I'm saying? So it's an absolutely ludicrous way of going about the legal process. But they knew that at the time. A lot of defense attorneys were saying as much. So the courts actually allowed this to happen. And that's why they wanted everything done in D.C.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think, okay, so now you plead, you do some time. Tell us about that. I mean, famously, MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, friend of ours, went to visit people in the federal prison that you guys were being held at. She said it was horrendous conditions. Give us a sense of that.
Well, MTG and Paul Gosar, I believe, were the only congressmen that came to visit me personally in Alexandria. There was a number of congressmen that, did the dog and pony show of going down to the DC jail. Look, a lot of these people really don't care. Some of them do. Some of them really do. People like Gosar. And, surprisingly, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she actually gave me 5 minutes, 10 minutes at AmFest last year or 2 years ago. So some of these people actually do care. But for the most part, these people are just, like political talking points for a lot of these politicians. They don't actually care about them. I was not allowed to see Paul Gosar or Marjorie Taylor Greene. I had no idea they were even there. The conditions to the DC jail, first of all, I was only in the DC jail for 11 days. So those 11 days sucked. I'd never experienced racism before in my life until I went to the DC jail. But then after that, I was transferred to Alexandria, Virginia, because they could accommodate my organic diet that was court ordered. Thank you, Judge Lamberth. And that place wasn't much better, really, to be honest with you. But, the funny thing is about environmental pressure like that is that you really, if you're smart and you're strong, then you really go deep inside yourself and you find some stuff out about yourself that maybe you didn't know. Things you didn't know you had, strength and faith you didn't know you had.
So let's fast forward to this past week. Last week, Liz Cheney receives, let me be sure I get this right. She received a medal, the Presidential Citizens Medal of Honor from Joe Biden. Had a lot of us on the right going, what the hell are you doing? Your thoughts about Liz Cheney, her committee, and then receiving this medal from Biden?
I think it's evidence that God loves poetic justice and has a sense of humor. The look on Liz Cheney's face, that's why I keep smiling so much, because I just keep thinking about the look on her face when that when that Medal of Freedom was put around her neck or whatever that was. Like, oh my gosh, the cringe, like everybody in the room could feel it, you know. Everybody watching it on video could feel it. It's evidence, in my opinion, that the narrative has clearly become so obviously a lie that anybody associated with it knows that their political career or even their social life, you know, if they're involved, it's over. You know, Liz Cheney will likely never serve another term in Congress ever again. And she knows she has the contempt of many, many, many American people.
Do you think
So that is its own form of punishment. I'm sorry. I want to answer your question. That's its own form of punishment. A lot of people think like, oh, these people need to serve time in prison and stuff. And it's like, look, dude, if you know God, then you got to know God's got these people. And like, you know, can you imagine what it's like to actually be Hillary Clinton or be Nancy Pelosi or be Liz Cheney, you know, or Chuck Schumer or Mitch McConnell? I mean, these people, they have no will of their own. It's almost like they've sold their soul. That sounds terrible to me. You know what I'm saying?
So what do you think her motivation was, Liz Cheney, for joining that committee and being such an outspoken member of that committee, and you know, and now she's feeling the accolades of it or whatever this is?
Look at who her father is. Okay, you think that Liz ran for office because it didn't make Daddy proud? Okay, you got to keep in mind that these people, it's a familial business in many ways. And as far as bowing to the neocons and serving the deep state, Liz Cheney's done a very good job. She's done she made Daddy proud. You know what I'm saying? But in that regard, you also have to kind of realize how distorted Daddy's lenses are. You know what I'm saying? So, like, I think that, especially think about being Liz Cheney, like growing up and her father being such a powerful man in D.C. You know, I try to see things from everybody's perspective and try to have a Christ-like mercy and love, in spite of the fact that I don't agree or understand somebody's, you know, position on things.
Okay, so let's take that one step further. So she's trying to please Daddy by what? Was it she's trying to attack Trump or anything that was pro-Trump, and you guys were just the pawns caught in the middle of it, January 6 people?
Something like that. It was definitely a setup and a psyop, I think. The question is to what end? To get Trump off the ballot, to imprison his and make an example of his supporters, have the left cheering as people's constitutional rights are trampled, because that's what took place. Using it as political ammunition. To what end? To maintain the monopolies of the deep state, bro. You know, Liz Cheney represents more than just her position in Congress. She represents the family that she comes from and the people that they're connected to. That's important. That's like the unspoken thing that a lot of people, I guess, just don't seem to understand about politics or statecraft in general.
Agree with you. Very, very important. I mean, you said something before that last comment. It was obviously a setup and a psyop. Tell us who the brain trust, who's calling the shots, who are the puppet masters of that?
Well, look at it like this, okay? The setup was in from, I would say, probably October 2019 because of Event 201. Are you familiar with Event 201?
I'm not. Please help us out.
It's a training exercise. It's essentially the exact same. It's what's called a scenario plan. It's like the exact same thing that happened with COVID. Like the exact scenario of COVID was Event 201, and it's like a scenario plan where all these people get together and pretend like something is happening and what they're going to do, what their response is supposed to be. They did something similar, like a scenario plan on 9/11 when the attacks took place, and that's why I said they were like, "Oh, we didn't know. We thought it was just a training exercise." So I think the fix was in all the way back then. They knew that they had to do something about Trump. And if you understand these people the way that I do, they think decades and centuries ahead. So they definitely didn't see Trump getting in office. And that really was a bump in their plan, I think, a little bump in the road. So they did everything that they could. They mobilized all of their forces and they did everything they could to get him out of office. And that includes releasing COVID and then lying about it for years, But if you look at it from that perspective, then all the lockdowns and the destruction of all Trump's progress in the economy, then the riots and the chaos and calling these people protesters while calling Trump supporters going to rally super spreaders, then the events of the Hunter Biden laptop suppression and the 51 intelligence agents. If you think the 51 intelligence agents that said the Hunter Biden laptop was fake aren't in one way or another likely involved somehow, some way with January 6th, you got another thing coming. And then you got the stolen election, the rigged election and the stolen presidency, rather. And then you have the 2 MAGA million marches before January 6th. And then you have the events of January 6th. Now, before January 6th, like 3 weeks before, Chief Sund had his emergency powers to invoke the National Guard at will, revoked by Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell. They changed the law so that he could not have the authority to invoke the National Guard at will, that he had to go through them. Okay? Now, if you understand how big of a deal that is, then you'll really understand how big of a deal it is that Yogananda Pittman, friend of Nancy Pelosi, and also Capitol Police intelligence officer, she's in charge of all intel getting to Chief Sund, she sat on the intel, right? She sat on the intel that would be necessary for Chief Sund to submit the proper paperwork to get the National Guard in there, okay? When he submitted the paperwork without any of the intel that Yogananda Pittman was sitting on, he was told no. They said it's bad optics, or that there's no need, there's no need for this to happen. There's no need for the National Guard to be there. You haven't given any evidence that there's a danger. Okay, but like I said, Yogananda Pittman was sitting on that. It was this Yogananda Pittman is also the one that sat on her hands like Nancy Pelosi did for an hour while there was chaos ensuing at the Capitol, and Tarek Johnson's asking to evacuate the Senate and the House, and he's saying it for over an hour into his mic, into his walkie-talkie, and silence. Now keep in mind, there was also somebody that opened up the magnetic doors from the inside. Okay, so there's all of this weird stuff. All right, and the debate regarding the certification was stopped. Now, that's kind of interesting, considering that the debate of the certification actually would have benefited Donald Trump. It would have benefited the people. And that's actually what we wanted, was for us to say, hold on a second, we don't want to certify just yet. Let's look at all this evidence. So that being said, if you look at the events of January 6th and the fact that the pipe bomber has not been found, the fact that whole thing, that all the cables, all of the text messages, all of the exchanges from Secret Service on January 6th were deleted, the way that the January 6th committee deleted all of their evidence, the way it was a show trial, they brought somebody in from Hollywood, like the whole thing stinks like a regime change, like a puppet government style regime change, like what we've done in other countries. Only now they've essentially tried to turn America into one of their banana republics.
So you're making really a sensible argument. You're presenting what would appear to be evidence. It sounds like the puppet masters or the people pulling the strings aren't necessarily within the confines of the continental United States. It sounds like this might be an international New World Order type group that would want some sort of change and keep a populist like Donald Trump away from the office of presidency.
Yes, what we're talking about here is like an international crime syndicate of the most wealthy and powerful individuals on the planet. They not just own many of the major corporations or banks around the world, they also own a lot of the black market trades, whether that be child and human trafficking or the modern day slave trade, or things like, the drug trade. Like, remember, cocaine was being brought in by the tons by the CIA during the crack explosion. Okay, so if you think for 1 second that there aren't some sort of state actors or some form of intelligence agencies or secret groups of people they're making billions and billions of dollars off the fentanyl that's coming across the border, then you got another thing coming.
All right, so very quickly, I know you have another interview set up. A couple things. Trump, where are you with Trump? There was at one point, it was reporting that you were against Trump because you weren't getting pardoned. I also know that you ran for Congress, a pro-Trump run for Congress. Where are you with Trump? And then I have one more final question for you. So how is your standing with Trump? What is your feeling about Trump?
My previous attorney did not represent me very well at all. I never asked him to say that I felt duped by Trump or that I denounced. I never asked that. I never said that. I love Donald Trump. I support Donald Trump, and I always have. So the fact that he said that really, really upset me, and it has unfortunately haunted me with, many such people like yourself. That being said, when it comes to my campaign for Congress, I was running on single bill voting law, a amendment for term limits for congressmen and staff, a criminalization of the current lobbying that's taking place in D.C., and $1 million fines, expulsion from Congress, and prosecution for all Congress members and staff caught insider trading.
Good.
And
Good.
I don't think that's not a pro-Trump campaign. That's a pro-America. You know what I mean?
Love that platform. I mean, I think there may be another run in this somewhere. I mean, as a libertarian, I support all that and probably a lot of the other things you support. Now, one final question. These big billionaire, I don't know, string pullers, let's call them diabolical people from around the world. I'm thinking of the World Economic Forum. I'm thinking of New World Order types, Bilderberg, et cetera. Very famously, Elon Musk has become very close to Donald Trump. Elon, the most richest, most powerful financial guy on the planet, has now become very close to the most powerful individual on the planet in Donald Trump. What do you think of that relationship?
I think that those two things that you're saying are somewhat illusions. Elon Musk, he may be called the most wealthy man on the planet in like the time, but no, dude, no. He's got nothing on the Rothschilds, bro. You know what I'm saying? But they just don't want to be known as the wealthiest family in the world. And when it comes to Donald Trump and being the most powerful man, that you might be somewhat right about, because one of the things that Donald Trump has that people like George W. or Bill Clinton or even Barack Obama, the one thing Trump has that all those people don't, is the real love of the majority of the people, or at least their respect. And in one way or another, even though he's a billionaire, he's essentially become one of the middle class. He's been accepted as one of the middle and lower class because of the way that the establishment has attempted to bring him, just like drag him through the mud, and tried to make him one of the poorest or one of the middle class, by just gutting him in every chance they could. And it hasn't worked. So he's embodying, I think, the American spirit. He's embodying the free, strong, independent, wealthy, abundant American spirit. And I think that that's something that everybody that has any sort of sense, either in this country or abroad, actually respects quite a lot. And I'm glad to see it, as a part of the American presidency. And the Elon Musk and Trump getting together, I think, is something that scares the globalists very much, because of the fact that Elon is so rich and because of the fact that Trump is so powerful.
Very, very interesting. I agree with you, Jake. I think Trump, what they put him through is very similar to what they put you through, and the rest or most of the rest of the January 6th people. I think he feels that he was unfair. He was. It was. They sent everything at him. They changed laws to make misdemeanors, push him up to felonies. They went after him from federal level, from state level, every which way. And then when they put that mugshot of Trump out, the world, the United States at least, went, "What are you guys doing? What are you doing?" And it just everyone realized anyone could be that person on that mugshot, and it really just unified the country. And very interesting. I'm glad you're saying that. I wonder, there's some talk of Trump pardoning, January 6ers. I know you paid your debt to society or to them, whatever, but he could also remove that conviction, I guess, or whatever you pled for, but that could be removed. Do you think that's going to happen?
I've heard that what he's going to do is he's going to first grant clemency. And from a legal standpoint, that's a much wiser idea. Look, nobody's saying that the events that took place outside the building on January 6th or the breaching of the building illegally is acceptable, okay? An investigation needs to be done, a real investigation. And that also includes into state actors or intel agencies involved in the setup, okay? That also entails possible crimes that might have been committed by maybe federal agents or confidential informants. The FBI said as much in their recent report. They said that some of their confidential human informants actually did go inside the building and they did break laws, but they have not been prosecuted. Well, why not? You know what I'm saying? So an investigation needs to be done. But people like grandmas that went into the building and are being slammed with a felony and being forced to go to prison, like, this is why they say in prison, don't F with the feds, because like, dude, the feds do not care. Tyranny does not care if you are a 70-year-old woman and you just walked in and looked around and then left. You're going to jail,
All right. Well, Jacob, really good having you on this 4th anniversary of the protests at January 6th. And by the way, they are certifying the Trump win today as well. Jacob, appreciate your time. Shaman, good talking to you.
Poetic justice. God has a sense of humor. Love you guys.
You too, brother.